could never learn enough on our own to get the Ark back on course. We don't even know how to steer.
Hundreds of years in the future, 3 young people from a farming community make their way through a giant space ark, trying to find some way of preventing a devastating collision.
What have you done?
I've stopped the ship, Captain.
You fool! You've endangered all of us!
Though, of course, along the way they will become embroiled in all sorts of occasionally exciting, but mostly not all that exciting, adventures.
It is a manifest impossibility.
The Starlost.
Why, Roloff? Why me? Why did you implant me?
Because I'm evil and corrupt.
The Starlost was a 1973 series made in Canada that is probably one of the oddest and most unique 1970s science fiction shows covered on this channel. It's made on videotape, it's not aimed at kids, and it's pitched as a serious science fiction drama.
Can I be of assistance?
It's also a show that has a very poor reputation from many who've seen it, and also from those who worked on it.
Then they take the guts out and throw them into a shallow grave.
Of course, many of the negative comments have originated from the show's creator, Harlan Ellison.
Good.
We went into the Starlost with an open mind, though if you're somebody who absolutely loved the Starlost back in the day,
come on, we know you're out there!
That's great for you. We must warn you that this is not going to end up as an entirely complimentary review. The show's clash of high-minded stories, earnestness, and production values does tend to invite mockery, but then that's what they said about my high school's musical production of Tora Tora Tora.
Well, it's hard to know where things started to go wrong.
The Starlost is interesting, but not necessarily in the ways that it was intended to be interesting. But we will at least try to point out the good bits. Any day now.
Why don't you accept it and enjoy it?
Because it's not real.
The Starlost does look more than a little cheesy, but it's played very straight down the line. As somebody who can usually look past low-rent production values of older shows made on tape rather than film, this does look like the sort of thing that I'd normally get a kick out of, like I do with Doctor Who or Blake 7 or some old BBC drama. There at least there is some good writing and acting that helps you look past the wobbly walls and wobblier special effects. The Starlost has relatively better special effects than some of those BBC shows of the 70s, but where it really falls down is with the words.
You expect me to believe that?
Some story ideas do have merit, but then the show degenerates very quickly into fairly standard action-adventure stories made on a budget of dozens of tens of Canadian dollars.
I am what you have become, an explorer.
The reams of expositionary dialogue often feel very clunky, and many of the characters are about as likeable as a glove box full of parking tickets.
Hear me say it, your manner is noxious as water drawn from the waste conduits.
The Starlost is set roughly 800 years in the future, where Earth has been a long-dead planet, and we don't just mean that the only thing open late is a 7-Eleven.
Just what kind of selfish people are you?
The giant ship Ark was launched as a generational ship on its way to find a habitable planet. However, during the journey, there was some sort of accident that destroyed the ship's main bridge. Several hundred years later, a trio of young people are looking for a way to prevent the Ark from the inevitable collision with a star. Throughout the Ark, there are many biospheres containing up to 100 different communities, most of which are inhabited by people with their own ideas, and few of them have any idea what's going on outside their own backyard. I, of course, do know what's going on in my backyard, as apparently do my neighbours who recently purchased binoculars.
We saw them in the garden through the window.
In one of these communities, Cypress Corners, young Devon finds himself at odds with the leaders of his simple farming community. He wants to marry his girlfriend Rachel, but she's promised to blacksmith Garth. Devon discovers that they're living on a giant spaceship, but guess what? In this burg, a scientific theory backed by empirical observation counts as heresy, punishable by death.
What is deep space?
Earthship Ark traveled for...
Devon and Rachel escape, with Garth initially giving chase, but quickly the trio become a mostly inseparable team after they discover more about the enormous vessel.
There is no crew, they're all dead.
Of course, there's the big problem that the Ark will be destroyed if they cannot find somebody who can alter the ship's course. Now that's the setup to the series of mostly episodic adventures, where, over 16 episodes, the Starlost would share the same structure as many other dramas, people wandering through a large area, having individual adventures, helping out people, but never managing to do anything about their overall mission. I dig. I had planned to retire by the time I was 30, but there were things that got in the way, things that stopped me. It was buying a house, paying off debt, all those career ups and downs. You know, the things that you have no control over and you're just a helpless victim. It's the system working against you, man. It's just holding you back. It's that, and definitely not my online gambling addiction, dumping my pension into crypto and meme stocks, and trying to build a complete collection of vintage Skylanders toys. Devon is the leader of the trio who keeps the group on their path, though he's given about as much character as a wheel of plastic cheese wrapped up in plain brown paper. He's single-minded in his pursuit of looking for a way to save the Ark. He and Rachel are apparently in love, but it's a fairly sedate romance, where it gets about as hot and heavy as an icy gust of wind. Rachel is the heart of the group, thinking more of people's feelings and emotions over getting the job done. Garth was once Devon's love rival, but that never gets too awkward, apart from him carrying around a crossbow. Garth is the more headstrong of the group. His initial antipathy towards Devon and Rachel dissipates, though it generally doesn't take much of a push for Garth's old resentments to resurface.
I'll kill you!
They were originally from a simple farming community, seemingly based somewhat on the Amish or the Mennonites, but not explicitly so. Devon, Rachel and Garth will begin their journey with very little idea of technology that's more advanced than a plough, whether it's computers or spaceships. And they're the ones who are going to stop this hulking great spaceship from hitting a sun. It's a bit like asking your crazy Aunt Denise if she's seen any good herbal remedies on Facebook that will deal with a burst appendix.
The only unknown factor, Dr. Asgard, was 3 very human beings.
The trio occasionally ask the ship's computer host, found him. Actually, no, but his name is not Waldo, and he's about as useful as a help desk staffed by belligerent ducks. The host is a separate system from the rest of the Ark's computer systems. It's basically the information kiosk in a shopping mall.
Medical Center, Level G.
The Starlost, being a science fiction show, just loves making up its own specific bits of jargon, such as bounce tubes for travelling between the biospheres and sphere projectors.
Probability 1 chance in 53.
While the trio start from a low knowledge base, they will gradually pick up little bits of knowledge about astronomy, engineering, astrogation, engines, reactors, computers, power systems, airlocks, life support systems. So much so that by the end of the series, they can even help with small technical jobs, Garth can pilot a small ship, and crucially, they no longer soil themselves every time a door magically opens and closes by itself.
There's been an unfortunate accident.
They do, of course, still lack crucial knowledge to save the Ark.
We could find out about the Ark and how it works.
As they travel throughout the ship, they'll encounter a few people who might be able to help. They accidentally revive an engineer from suspended animation, only to find out that he was frozen until they could find a cure for what was killing him.
These people were saved for the future when they would be needed. Well, this is the future, and we need him.
An exploration craft returns from a 10-year mission, only to discover that they've actually returned 400 years later, which is either time dilation at work or a pretty lousy excuse for holding on to the public library's copy of The Joy of Sex.
There was no way to be sure.
There are several times when they meet a scientist who might be able to help them, but they're instead obsessed with their own projects rather than saving the Ark. The Ark is pretty well screwed if this is the best they can come up with. One scientist wants to set off the ship's self-destruct rather than try and help save the ship. Another has sent in an agent to destroy the trio's harmony while he observes in order to prove some scientific theory. A supercomputer that might be able to help the trio is worried about its own programming. Devon's injured, but a doctor who can save him is more interested in potentially saving some aliens. One scientist does work with the trio to move the Ark slightly in order to avoid a comet. But for whatever reason, this method is not able to be used to save the ship from crashing into a star. So lots of genius types and brilliant jerks who, for whatever reason, are just not able to lend a hand. And then they're never heard from again. This might sound harsh, but man, some of these types really do love the sound of their own voice.
Those others were a contemptible lot to begin with.
Within the biospheres, there are also dozens of levels within each one, where many contain their own insular society. One has a society of only men who've decided that they don't need women, but at no point do they start making whiny videos about comic book movies.
I may seem magnificent to you, my dear Calabra.
Their leader sees Rachel as a goddess and decides to marry her. Another has a group of children in command, and at no point do any of them start streaming Minecraft.
Very well, we will hear your fantasy.
One industrial society produces 2 things: weapons and pollution. Another group controls their population with electronic implants, and then there's a group of scientists where killer bees are accidentally let loose.
The bees. 4 huge bees this big.
And then there's the alien Oro, who's not quite a villain, but he's certainly an antagonist. He's there helping himself to spare parts in one episode, but then later on will return to claim the Ark as salvage under the orders of the leaders of his own planet.
The Challenger begins.
Let's start with the good.
Now, let's not get too excited about this, shall we?
The show has a pretty decent roster of guest actors, all of whom are taking this very seriously. There's a mix of familiar actors from the US, from Canada, and from Britain. So to name but a few, John Colicos, Walter Koenig, Angel Tompkins, Percy Rodriguez, Alexandra Bastido, Barry Morse, Simon Oakland, Sterling Hayden, and of course a few others. Fans of 70s Canadian productions will probably recognise more of the guest cast. The main trio are okay. Robin Ward seems to have found something of a character as Garth, the slightly angry hothead of the group.
I could kill you for what you did.
Gay Rowan seems permanently bewildered as she tries to get the people they meet to understand what's going on and also to read numbers off readouts.
We can't destroy him. It would be like murder.
American Keir Dullea, who as the star of 2001 A Space Odyssey, was seen as a go-to star for a science fiction project and was perhaps attached to the series early on to help pre-sell the project to potential buyers.
Wait a minute.
Devon, originally called Vic, has this weary, bored intensity where, as the hero character, he's literally written without any flaws, rough edges, interests, or anything. Though on the plus side, he does have a pretty substantial mustache to do the heavy lifting.
Of course, I always have.
Devon is mainly there to keep the group motivated to find a way to save the ship. If there's some selfless putting yourself in harm's way to help the others, or a suicide mission or whatever, then Devon's totally up for that. Truth be told, as written, starring in this series is a pretty thankless role for the 3 leads.
You'll be able to witness the astronomical extravaganza of the millennium.
The best roles were often given to the guest stars, who all seem to talk an awful lot, even when they have nothing much of anything to say. I mean, I'm the same. So many times I'm appearing as an expert witness in the field of forensics in a criminal trial, and rather than explain how the blood got inside the toaster, I just waffle on about whether the Enterprise could beat the Night Industries 2000 in a space battle. I mean, the Enterprise has phasers and photon torpedoes, while the Night Industries 2000 has bucket seats and an ashtray. Oh, did not see that coming. These guest star roles would often have an assistant character as a sparring partner, somebody who's often sympathetic to our trio and whose job it is to really just keep the guest star's character from going too far.
That's what assistants are for.
Just like this video, there's not an awful lot of humour in the Starlost, where every guest actor performs as if they were the reason that anybody was watching.
Don't be a fool.
Some of the acting from the supporting cast can feel a little flat, but it's not helped by the writing that's aiming at a rather lofty level, but the results are rather patchy.
Hey, you little, come here!
There's a tendency for writers to give the guest stars long, bloviating speeches, while giving supporting artists characters written so thinly that you could use them as tracing paper.
The past may be all that we have.
From here, the tyrant Rolf controlled us.
Some scripts are alright, but by the end of the show's 1 season, the inspiration seems to have fallen foul to the curse of things just not coming together.
The shield that's closing in on us will be crushed.
While there are sci-fi trappings here and there, it's really an action-adventure series mixed in with a human drama, though the litany of aloof episodic antagonists in love with their own magnificence contrasts with the very shallow supporting characters.
Finding a thought for their heads is a luxury they can't afford.
But far too often, the characters in Starlost feel like names on a script rather than real people. Quite simply, you really don't end up caring whether or not the ship crashes into the sun. Actually, no, I tell a lie. You do care. You just hope that you're around to see the fireworks.
Now, would you mind telling me what this is all about?
In this show, variable writing begat variable acting, which begat viewer apathy. The final episode produced was an incredibly weird one, where Garth just decides to head home, but on the way to Cypress Corners, he stops to become a cop in a hitherto unmentioned intra-arc police force. Devon and Rachel seem to disappear for most of the episode, where they're trapped with a diminishing air supply and then pretty much forgotten about.
We'll make a detective out of you yet.
Well, I'll let you know.
And then that was the Starlost. Does the arc hit that sun?
You were looking right at it, but obviously it didn't register. Do you see these things coming at us?
Despite its made-in-Canada credentials, the Starlost originated in the US. The original idea was for 20th Century Fox to co-produce a short science fiction series with another company, but when potential partners such as the BBC declined, they revised their plans and their budgets. Fox and the BBC did co-produce another science fiction series in 1973, the 6-part series Moonbase 3, created by Doctor Who's then current production team of Barry Letts and Terrance Dicks. Moonbase 3 was also pitched as a super serious science fiction drama, but also considered a bit of a misfire by its creators.
The Ark is a colossal resource of power and technology.
Meanwhile, the producers of the Starlost would aim its sights a little lower and head for first-run syndication. The show would be recorded on videotape and produced in Canada, ostensibly because of incentives. Starlost would be co-produced by CTV and Glen Warren Productions and recorded at studios in Ontario. The production personnel were mainly Canadian, though along with much of the cast, there were also a few Americans writing, directing and guest starring. Harlan Ellison was a noted science fiction writer who was also noted for being highly protective of his work, which would lead to him being noted for being rather entertainingly belligerent when discussing, well, pretty much anything that he didn't personally write.
We have a very serious situation here.
Ellison had written novels and short stories, but had also scripted for a number of television series, both science fiction and non-science fiction projects. His sole Star Trek story, City on the Edge of Forever, was quickly acknowledged as that series' finest episode, though the various rewrites needed to get that episode in a shootable condition rankled Ellison. Big surprise. Apparently, Ellison never once mentioned it again. Sorry, that should read, Ellison had some thoughts on the matter. Anyone who ever had to rewrite or edit his work could expect to hear back at some point that Ellison was displeased about, and then just insert something.
A rather barbaric period in your American history.
Ellison had written a pilot script for the Starlost to kick things off and had planned to write more scripts, but then his pilot script was rewritten and, well, Harlan did not like that.
Well, if you don't understand that, you don't understand friendship.
He was not happy with how his baby was being handled, nor did he like the casting of Keir Dullea, and he stepped back from the project, invoking his writer's prerogative to use a pseudonym. When Harlan was really pissed off, he went by Cordwainer Bird professionally, and that was the credit used on Starlost. Cordwainer because Ellison liked another writer by that name, and maybe it sounds vaguely rude if you have a mind wired that way, but a cordwainer is just another name for a shoemaker. There's nothing vulgar about a shoemaker. In this context, the Brits also have a word for somebody who fixes shoes that does seem actually appropriate to the circumstances: cobblers. Also, we should point out that there's really nothing vulgar about shoes or feet, unless of course you're Joss Whedon.
What happened was a quirk, a chance thing, a stupid accident.
However, Harlan Ellison had a line in some amazingly erudite put-downs for those who earned his displeasure. Though, as a lot of people earned his displeasure, there was no real choice between quantity and quality of his put-downs. Harlan Ellison was only one of a number of people working on Starlost who would drop out along the way. One of the early principals behind Starlost was executive producer Douglas Trumbull, who'd been an effects supervisor on 2001: A Space Odyssey and had directed his own film Silent Running. His expertise was relied on to make Starlost work.
We're going to move this ship even if I have to get out into space and push it.
With the series being made in a TV studio, the Starlost was envisaged to use chroma key to composite live-action elements against model backdrops. The original plan was to use a system called Magicam, which would feature 2 video cameras whose movements were synchronized. So if you zoomed or panned on one camera shooting actors against a colored backdrop, a second camera recording a model backdrop would zoom and pan perfectly with the first camera.
This has never been attempted before.
A similar British system, SceneSync, was trialled by the BBC in the early 80s, but like Magicam, was also found to be fiddlier than that guy on the roof. Magicam shots in the final production seem few and far between thanks to its poor reliability, and instead the vast bulk of the series is made with standard chroma key with static locked-off cameras.
Devin, I had hoped you'd be happy to see me again.
Indeed, the use of chroma key in general is vastly reduced as the series progresses, though it's clear the series was not made in a particularly large studio. Indeed, even simple chroma key for set extensions and virtual sets was used less and less as the series wore on.
It's not going to work, Magnus, not this time.
Part of me likes the ambition of the Starlost pushing the envelope of early 1970s video technology, But the other part of me also recognises how shooting this on videotape is the thing that most dates the Starlost to any casual viewer.
I knew it.
What works for a 1970s British drama doesn't really work as well on an ambitious North American production that's hoped to sell to stations who perhaps wanted more cheap science fiction programming to show alongside Star Trek reruns. You can either watch a new episode of The Starlost or the 15th screening of The Way to Eden.
It seems so hopeless.
The Starlost has some effects footage of the Ark filmed on what looks like 16mm film, but often spaceship models were recorded on video, which is something that doesn't always do justice to the designs. It is shot in a television studio, and as such there are many compromises inherent in a multi-camera studio.
Well, I guess he just didn't have any other way of doing it.
If they hadn't needed so much chroma key, shooting this on 16mm film would have done the show wonders.
Because none of it's real.
The show's physical sets are just about adequate, apart from the bright, floodlit look which saps any remaining atmosphere faster than a malfunctioning airlock.
This is very serious.
While sets have a reasonable amount of detail to them, episodes are set mostly within the Ark, and so the same set pieces are used over and over in different ways. And approximately 30% of the show's budget seems to have gone on buying the national stock of green moulded foam. There's so much green moulded foam that I suspect the makers of the series must have been involved with Big Foamer. Despite our criticism, the show's production values are not the series' main problem. It's the scripts and storylines, which quickly descend into cliches. There's an awful lot of acting that's either very static or very theatrical.
We know, but there's nothing we can do.
If you close your eyes, you could be forgiven for thinking you were listening to a 1960s radio play adaptation of a short story written in the 50s, and then after you opened your eyes, you'd be assaulted by a barrage of brightly lit and garishly coloured sets. I haven't seen so much bright green and orange since I was violently ill at the Fanta Factory.
I thought we were going to forget all about that.
Science fiction writer Ben Bova was brought on as a consultant, but he too found his time working on the show disappointing.
I don't like this, Devon.
He later used his experience as the basis of a satirical novel about working on a terrible science fiction series called The Star-Crossed. Sick burn, Ben.
Words are cheap.
With the departure of Ellison, other television writers came on board, some with experience of writing for Star Trek and Lost in Space, but in general the Starlost ends up as one of those series where there is very little to recommend it. The writing is not universally terrible, but it's also not particularly inspired.
I've taken a lifetime vow to protect the writings. You would have to kill me first.
And as such, there's some really flat acting, which can be put down to people thinking that's how they talk in the future, like a store mannequin looking for respect from the other store mannequins.
And what is once lost can never be regained.
Starlost ran for 16 episodes before the plug was pulled, though a few more episodes were reportedly ready for production if required. But they weren't. So sad.
You might just wind up a bunch of little microcircuits on the floor, an electronic puddle.
As was the fashion in the 1980s, several episodes were edited together to make television movies, which leads me to conclude two important things. Some people will know Starlost mainly from those television movies shown on cable television in the 80s, and secondly, cable television must have really sucked in the 80s.
You're a raving lunatic.
We've tried to take a look at the positives of Starlost in this review. Well, maybe not that hard, but, we gave it a go. This was one of those shows where I personally had no knowledge of its existence. And then on holiday in Europe in the 90s, on some local channel late at night, there was Walter Koenig in his gold spacesuit. The show didn't look all that good, so I didn't keep watching. But it was in fact decades later, long after beginning this channel, that I finally learned some details about what that weird show was. I did come into this being very curious, but now that I've seen it all properly, there was the whirlwind of emotions. From disappointment to relief that, although it wasn't all that good, it was a fun enough watch in order to review. It's an ambitious train wreck in slow motion, hamstrung by a lack of creative vision, and a budget so small it would look like an amoeba influencer flexing. In a footnote, several production personnel behind The Starlost would later work on another dog of a series, the far more successful The Littlest Hobo. One of Starlost's directors, George McCowan, and the show's producer, William Davidson, would later give us Canada's greatest purely homegrown science fiction production, H.G. Wells' The Shape of Things to Come.
Tell me what we have been doing for the past 500 years.
The Starlost is what happens when enthusiasm gets the better of you, when big ideas get trampled by the reality of making those ideas happen without the resources to do them justice. You might have fond memories of it, which is of course wonderful for you, or you might just look at this, shake your head and sigh. It's definitely a case of you really had to be there. If you enjoyed this review, please like and subscribe, leave a comment below, or check out some of our other videos.